Welcome, welcome, welcome. New Africa August, day 24, guys. Today we have our workshop. Let's chat boys to men to fathers, the social and emotional health of the Black male. I'm going to introduce our moderator, um, Rahman Khan, who is a seasoned executive in strategic philanthropy, external affairs, community engagement, and diversity and inclusion. Um, Brother Rahman also has a program, Good Works with Rahman Khan, that aired on the PBS station WTPI. He also has degrees in business as well as counseling. He has worked in both the public and private sector. He has volunteered with a number of organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. Rahman Khan. Thank you and welcome, Brother Rahman.
All right, Sister Kasi, thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope everybody's doing okay on this Monday afternoon. And we're looking forward to an exciting and engaging panel today on social and mental, emotional health of men, particularly African American men. I'm going to first thank Kasi and Sharif and Rashid Knox and all the organizers for putting together such an important program. We're going to have, it's going to be a conversation today, and the three gentlemen we have with us this afternoon, we're going to have a conversation about these important subjects, something that I don't think is talked about as much. And for We Buy Black and New Africa, it's about expanding opportunities. What I see it is expanding opportunities for African Americans and really looking at opportunities for African Americans to be better financially, better in terms of wealth and economics, but a big part of that is health too, and not just the physical health, but the social health, the mental health, the psychological health that we are dealing with. So we're glad to have this going on this afternoon. We see a few folks coming into the chat. Appreciate that. Appreciate you all checking in. It looks like some folks from around the country coming in. So good to have it. So let's get started. Y'all ready to get started?
Oh yes.
All right. So I'm gonna do a quick. I'm gonna ask folks to do a quick introduction. I'm gonna start off with William Johnson the third, or Will, or Trip, or number 3, or whatever you want to call him, Trey. Just to introduce yourself. Tell us where you from, where you live now, and just a quick 20, 30 seconds about yourself.
All right, yeah, no problem. All right, my name is William Johnson III. I'm from Philadelphia. I went to Central High School when I was in Philadelphia. I went to Howard University for undergrad. And
all right.
Yeah, yes, sir. And North Carolina Central for law school. Currently, I live in Maryland. I practice bankruptcy law and other civil litigation with my father here, William Johnson Jr. And that's about it.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. Appreciate you being here with us today. And Dad, William Johnson Jr. Can you introduce yourself, please?
All right. My name is William C. Johnson Jr. I am Will's father. I'm also a Howard University grad as well as a North Carolina Central University MBA and JD. I also have a Master of Law from Villanova University as well. And we practice civil litigation. We have the Johnson Law Group in Greenbelt, Maryland, bankruptcy law, a lot of consumer-related litigation, real estate-related litigation. And my family, we hail from North Carolina, I guess from New York to North Carolina, that same pipeline most people have traveled. And we're just here today to participate.
That's good, man. Let me hold something when you finish, man. Y'all got a couple of duckets. Let me hold something. And my friend, my brother, Jonathan Nazeer. Introduce yourself, please.
Wow. Man, these some big shoes to come behind. I'm Jonathan Nazeer. I hold a degree in physics. No, I'm just joking. I try to pull up something. But I hail from originally from Greensboro, North Carolina. I attended Shaw University. I work in advertising and marketing. I actually work for ESPN Charlotte here in Charlotte. And I'm just happy to be on the conversation with you, Rahman.
All right.
And these two fine gentlemen.
Appreciate it. So glad to have you all on, man. And Will and William, I just left Philly the other day, dropping my son off at Temple University, and I lived in North Carolina for 20 years. I now live in New York, right outside the city, and from D.C., Maryland area. So we got a lot of common. And Jonathan, of course, we know him for many, many years. So we're gonna be real today, man. We're gonna have some real conversation. I think the expectations are we're gonna have some real conversation. Again, we'll take some Q&A towards the end. Kafi and the moderator and the organizer said, look, just go. I mean, just have real candid conversations. So we want to do that. So I want to first dive into just family structures that you all have, and I think that's going to help us frame some of the conversations we have. So William, we know y'all are father and son. I'll start with you, William. What's your family structure? Are you brothers? You have brothers, sisters? Did you grow up in a two-person household? Just tell us a little bit about. You have other children as well.
Sure. In terms of a family structure, I come from a two-parent household. We were living in Brooklyn together, but I also experienced when my parents were apart. So I had a single mom for about 3 years before my father actually rejoined the family unit. I am the middle child of three. The oldest boy, I have an older sister and a younger brother. And of course, Will, as my son, is my only son, and currently unmarried.
Okay. All right. William, your dad talked a little bit about you. Can you talk a little bit about your structure and just kind of how you grew up and any other thing about your family structure?
Yeah, no problem. So my parents, they met at Howard University. They had me at a relatively young age. They separated, and I lived with my mom, and I lived with her in New York and Philadelphia. I have two other younger brothers via her, and I have a new son. He's be 7 months this weekend.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Congratulations, brother. Congratulations. Okay. All right. And Jonathan?
So my parents divorced at a very early age. I think it was probably like 2 or 3 years old. My stepfather came into play roughly when I was around 8. So I was raised by my stepfather, although I had a relationship with my father, who unfortunately was dealing with some mental health issues. And so it was a pretty tough relationship as a child. And like I said, my stepfather, who I always refer to as my father, is the one who raised me. I am the father of 4, 3 boys and a daughter. My oldest son is 27. I have a 25-year-old, soon to be 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old daughter.
Man, you look too young for that, brother. He's 27-year-old. So thank you, and I think that helps to frame our conversation today. So I want to go in and talk about just your socialization, because I really believe, and I do this presentation around frames of reference that I've done with groups, and it's about socialization, about how people learn and grow and develop. And William, I'll start with you. As a young man, as a boy growing up, what were the lessons that you learned from your father? And I would go with your father specifically. What did they teach you about being a man?
My father was a hard-working man. All right, he had many of the vices of young men at that particular time, but he was always there for the family. Even when my parents separated for the brief 3 years that they had separated, he lived around the corner. So when it came time for disciplining, he walked around the corner and did it. When it came time, if bills had to be paid, he showed up, he paid bills. He was always a strong father figure. And so I've always known him and respected him to be the man of the household, even when he wasn't there.
Mm. And how did that help you in your growth and development? Like, did you say, I want to be like this guy? Or did you say, no, if there's something different, I want to be than that?
Well, you know what? My parents instilled in me work and education. They were from the South, and that's all they knew that we were supposed to do. You have to work, get your education. And my father worked for the Postal Service. And realistically, his dream was for me to go into the Postal Service after I graduated. I got to Howard and got different ideas as to where my place was in society. But no matter what I chose, though, he supported me. And having that support as a backdrop drives you.
Yeah. Yeah. Jonathan, what about you, man? What did you see, or what did your father or your stepfather, either one of them, teach you?
Well, Rahman, for a good portion of my early childhood, it was really my grandfather who played the larger role. I think some of that was out of protection with my early on in the relationship with my stepfather. I think my grandfather just wanted to kind of protect me. And so I had a great childhood. I spent all of my time that I could underneath the wings of the senior elder of the family, being my grandfather. And so I was blessed enough to live down south, family. We all kind of congregate around each other. So my entire family was in one community, which can be good and bad. When you got into a little trouble, you may have got 4 or 5, pops on the backside before you even got home. But my grandfather had kind of old school sort of mentality. Children should be seen and not heard. Education was stress, but it was really for a lot of boys my age down south. We really saw the military as an outlet for many of us to be able to go off to school and achieve that education. And so
was that promoted with your grandfather too? Because I know there was some people who didn't believe in the military back then because of the inequities that had happened.
Not so much with my grandfather. I think I was a pretty decent athlete, and so I think the conversation my stepfather, who played a few seasons of professional football back when football players didn't make anything, but it was either you were going to go to school on an athletic scholarship or you were going to go to the military. And so I really almost did neither one of those, but education was stress. My stepfather came in and was a great role model. I think just early on for me, it was hard for me to trust anyone because I had just been my mom and I for so long. So that took a little bit of time. And I appreciated it more as an adult than I ever did as a child. But I think when you grow up with a single mom for so long, you kind of pick up these surrogates along the way. So it was my grandfathers and uncles and, it was other male members of the family, even though my father wasn't there.
Got it. Thank you. Will, so this is going to be a little tough for you because your dad is right here, right? But I'm going to push you on that. And look, none of this is rehearsed. Like, none of these questions are rehearsed. This is our first time going through this. But I'm going to push you. I'm going to ask you to open up as much as you can. You said your dad was, your parents were split, and you spent a lot of time with your mom and spent time with your dad as well. What did your dad teach you, regardless of whether or not he was in the house or not?
Well, yeah. So the way it went, I was with him every season, for all the school breaks. So a lot of those, he would drive up and pick me up from New York, and we would do the road trip down south. And a lot of those hours were spent on lessons, drilling lessons and whatnot about the importance of family, being responsible, being a man of your word, education. And so even though, we weren't in the same household all that time, I took some pivotal lessons from him. And not just him, though, but like his brother, my mom's brother, my grandfather, my stepfather. I was fortunate enough to have a bunch of positive male role models coming up. So the times when he wasn't, in the house with me, I could get some good male energy from other places because, my uncle lived with us at the time. So it was just those the core things I learned from him.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And you know, a lot of things we learn, you know, especially as men, and I'll say this because there's sayings that I think the saying goes like moms love their daughters, but moms love their sons but raise their daughters, or something like that. It's like they give you examples. They talk to you and raise the daughters, but the sons, it's like, you know, we're gonna love them and just hope they come out right. So you know, with my father, he wasn't the type to say I love you, right? My dad, he was a man's man. You know, he was get his hands dirty. He was out there making moves, doing things, you know, business, whatever else he was doing things. But he wasn't the type to say, you know, he would give advice, but he also showed by example. A lot of his work that has helped me was by example. The fact that he didn't say I love you all the time, I knew that he loved me. Like, he didn't have to say it, right? It was just kind of inherent, just by the things he did and the ways he tried to protect me and the lessons he tried to learn. So I ask you all, when was the first time, or tell me about a time that you can think about your dad saying I love you? Because that is something as Black men, I think, is not always communicated in the way that we might expect, or that others might think that we already have it. And any of you can start.
You know, let me say this. My father, old school from North Carolina, and he himself didn't verbalize love in that manner. It was more, much like your father, demonstrative, in terms of he took care of you. He made certain that you had everything that you needed, some of what you wanted, but everything you needed. And if I can recall him using the word love, it was really expressive to a group. And he would say to us, my sister and brother and I had a cousin who was always there with us, that he loved us. But it wasn't like an individual or direct thing. It was more or less, well, of course I love you. Like, look, you got good clothes on. Of course I love you. You know, that was the deal with it. So, and you knew it and you felt it. Not necessarily that it was expressed.
Yeah. And how did that impact you, just in terms of the way, did you want to hear that? You know, was that a part of, because maybe you didn't know any better, but is that something that you longed for, you wished for? Is that something you thought about later on in life?
No, actually, because I felt it, there wasn't a need for him to say it. So I was always in a very fortunate position across the board. So I felt love at all times. And because I felt it, he didn't have to say it. Now, I became aware of it as I got older with my son. And just by virtue of your education, you learn that sometimes people need to hear it. And I would say it to my son, but I didn't feel like I had to hear it. I guess I was just in a fortunate situation.
Yeah. And Will, how was that for you? You know, how was that for you, hearing from your male role model, or your dad, whether you were with him in the house or not, to hear him say, I love you? What was that like for you?
I mean, it was always a great feeling. I would add that, you know, he has like a very a humorous personality. So sometimes it was delivered in a joking way, but like he was saying, the figure off what he was saying, you felt the love. So he was
say that one more time. Say that one more time.
You know,
I didn't hear that.
Your helmet when you walk right his back. You know, like,
yeah.
You know, like,
hey, Will, hold on 1 second, because I think you're breaking up. You're breaking up just a little bit. I'm gonna come back to you in just a second. So I think you buffing just a second. Yeah, hold on 1 second, Will. Will, hold on 1 second. Jonathan, let's go to you. Let's go to you.
And so Rahman, you know, growing up with my father was diagnosed as clinically with schizophrenia at an early age, and so you know, I had a great, quite a bit of distance from him. But when I would see him, being his only child, his only son, that is, he was constantly telling me that he loved me. So I heard that quite a bit. I think for him, he couldn't provide me with anything else. So the only thing that he could give me was being able to tell me that he loved me.
And how old were you when you started hearing that?
I would say I was probably around 7 or 8. I think that I can remember. Now my stepfather, very often as a child, I can never remember him saying that he loved me. And so I think both my father and stepfather were both in just peculiar kind of situations. I think my father was trying to fight for my love because he didn't want me to love another man as much. And so I think he really kind of went out of his way to constantly tell me that. I think my stepfather just didn't want to overstep his bounds. And so I felt love from my stepfather, although he never said it on a continuous basis, you know. I felt the love because he put food on the table and a roof over my head. So he didn't have to tell me that he loved me. I knew that he did just because of the sacrifices and what he did to take care of me. My biological father, on the other hand, although he said he loved me, it was hard for me to comprehend that he did because he wasn't there. So it was a strange sort of dichotomy.
Because it seems as if we equate love with being taken care of, right? You having someone there for you that's going to take care of you and your needs, but to protect you, provide for you and your family, take care of your moms, those kinds of things. That seems to be the case. That's what traditionally, I think, as men, we say love is just being there and taking care of the business, right? Will, I want to come back to you, man. I think, having your dad here is, and your dad saying I don't know if it was something that was learned, but something that he thought that was important, that he said, I love you I don't know if it was at an early age, but he thought it was important enough to share with you, and just to kind of see how that made you feel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would say I value him doing that. I was saying earlier, I guess when I was getting cut off, that his delivery was more humorous than it was mushy or sentimental or what have you. So it would be in the midst of, like, hey, don't do that, don't do something stupid, I love you, like, one of those type things. But you also felt the genuine love for, the things that he did, or if he demonstrated that he was proud of something I did and how he would share that with other people. So there's different ways to interpret it, I guess, or to feel, what the love is.
Yeah, and again, so what did that do for you? Like, how did that help you in your growth and development?
I think it's easier to compare it to people I knew that didn't have those experiences. So I guess, like, when I was hearing it, I didn't make much of it because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And then I get around friends of mine, a lot of my friends to this day, I'm 32, a lot of my friends are like, man, I love the relationship you have with your dad. They didn't have that. They didn't have somebody, telling them that they love them that was a male. So
yeah,
I learned the value of it by seeing people that didn't have it, basically.
And so did you reciprocate that back to your dad?
Yeah, always. And then I do it with my son now too.
Yeah.
To not really be constrained by being macho or whatever. So, it's not, you're not less of a man to tell another man you love him. So
yeah,
that's just how I view it now.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, and that's why I'm pushing on this, as I think, from a societal standpoint, we have this image, in the schools. In the schools, you see elementary schools, there are a lot of women there, right? Children around their mothers, seemingly for the most part, when they're young, go to schools. I worked in the elementary school. My first job out of graduate school, I think it was like 50, 60 staff members. It was like 3 men in the building. And I don't know how many times I got called like dad or uncle, or kids coming to me and like, that's my dad, wanting to be around that male figure. And really me, I didn't even know it, but really try to deposit something in them to help them be a better girl or a better boy at that point. And so I think there's this image, like you said, of people not being tough enough, not being cool enough to be like a I love you type of guy, right? And so, William, I think that epiphany that you had, I don't know if it was learned or if it's just something you felt, but there seemed to be some kind of catalyst to make you say, I want to tell my son I love him. And I want to show emotion. This is kind of what our topic is. I want to show emotion and let my son see me have emotion, not just being angry, but just emotion in general for love.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. And also would say it was learned just by growing up and maturing and realizing that, my son living at the time up in New York, and I needed to be able to communicate with him and see him on a regular basis, and he needed to know that. And he adjusted very well. It was a great situation for him growing. He learned values. I learned about family, and just to parlay into a story. My father, as I mentioned earlier, he expressed his love demonstratively by taking care of us. And he, like I said, he was always there and supportive. And as an adult, I remember on one occasion with him sitting at the table and I was leaving to head back to DC. I usually stop and I'll give him a pound, shake his hand. But this particular time, I just walked up to him and I kissed him on his forehead. And, he's a older gentleman now, and he looked back, it looked to me as if his eyes were starting to water. And I walked out and I said goodbye. But I could feel that emotionally he felt that just by a kiss on the forehead. And, because of that expression, I think it helps him along. Even at this stage, it helps him along. Now, Will, this doesn't mean if you come to the office, you need to kiss me on the forehead. Let's be clear.
Well, do you remember that? Do you remember that when that incident happened? Did that stand out to you?
What happened?
when your dad kissed you on the forehead?
I think he was talking about his dad.
Yeah.
Oh, your dad?
Yeah, my dad, yeah.
Oh, your dad. So,
yeah.
Wow. And so you didn't reciprocate that to your son, though? You didn't turn it around?
You know what? It's funny. When he was a little boy, I kissed him all the time. And then as he got older, it's like, all right, I'm not going to kiss you all the time.
Yeah, that's important. Look, I have an 18-year-old son, man, and it's almost like shocking. Like, what? You gonna tell me you gonna kiss me on the like? I'm a dude, but when they're young, it doesn't really matter. Once they start getting older, it's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's good to hear, man. So I want to turn it to, because I think this love conversation is important, and I think our young brothers in particular, and girls too, our daughters too, need to hear that a man that's not trying to get something from them loves them unconditionally for who they are. Right? I'm not asking you for anything, because they're gonna have enough men and boys asking for something later on, but just a man that's their protector and their provider saying, I love you. I think that's so very valuable, and that it's something that can help in their particular growth and development. But I want to shift for a second, because this other emotion is connected to that, but it is around sadness, disappointment, or it could be happiness, and that is showing emotion of physical tears. Now, I know I don't remember even seeing my dad cry. My dad passed away about 11 years ago. He was 65 years old. I don't think I remember seeing him ever cry. But that's a real emotion. I mean, that's kind of a God-given emotion for us that helps us to alleviate certain types of things. And I'm sure he did it with my mom, and I'm sure he did it in private, but I just never saw it. So Jonathan, with you, man, did you ever see your dad or stepfather cry? And if you did, what did it do for you?
Well, when you grow up with a schizophrenic father, you see a lot of crying. You see a lot of emotion that can go from one end of the scale to the other. So as it relates to my biological father, I saw it quite a bit, and it was a saddening experience. You know, it made when to watch him cry made me feel weak. And so as it relates to my biological father, I saw that quite a bit. Now my stepfather, I saw him cry twice. I lost a child at an early age who was 7 months old, and that was the first time that I ever saw him cry. Was when I lost my child, and then.
And how old were you then?
I was young. I was only 18. Yeah, so I think to watch him cry like that was painful. And then when his mother passed, that was the only time that I could remember my stepfather crying. And you know, this was a big guy, you know, 6'5", you know, 325-pound former NFL player. So to see a big man of that stature to cry was humbling, and it was a total 360 from watching him cry as opposed to watching my biological father shed a tear.
Yeah, and I know that's tough and that's painful to watch, and you know I've known you for many years now. How is that I guess changed or allowed you or not allowed you to act in a similar kind of way with your children in terms of showing that kind of emotion?
Yeah, I think, you know, most of my children know that I'm an emotional guy. You know, I'm the guy that cries at the end of Rudy every time I see it. You know, I'm that guy. You know, if I
hear you, I feel you.
You know, if I'm that guy that when it comes to the love that I have for my children, I can remember coaching my sons as they were growing up, and I had the chance to give, you know, my son MVP award, and I could hardly keep my emotions together, you know, because it's your child, and you know you're proud of him. And so you know, when you know better, you do better. And so although I never really saw that side of the emotion with my stepfather, as he got older and in his wisdom, he just kind of taught me a lot. And I think some of the things that he kind of reflected on was, you know, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have done that with you, but I never wanted to overstep my bounds. And so I always saw him as my dad. I never, you know, it's very rarely that I even refer to him as my stepfather. He was my dad. And so I think as a father now, I'm learning to kind of express that a little bit more. I just think it's a generational thing. You know, my grandfather would have never shedded a tear. You know, it was just a total different thing with that generation, as opposed to now. I think the thing is we want our boys to be more in touch with their feelings. But I think, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of the middle guy in all of this. You know, I think sometimes we can take that too far to the extreme with boys as well. And now we're raising a bunch of boys that are just so emotional that you're just like, you know, you got to kind of get it together a little bit too. Yeah. So, you know, I think.
So what about with your son though? I mean, when they see you cry, do they say, "Man, my dad, he's a crier," or "My dad, he's a real man"? You know, how is that manifest?
I think they think it's hilarious. Now, I will tell you. I will tell you, I think you got to pick and choose your tears. You know what I mean? So if I will tell you, I'm one of those brothers. I don't mind to say that, in private times, I have to kind of shed a tear, but I do it in private. I don't let them see me in that space. And if they see me cry because I'm pumped up or I'm excited or I saw something emotional on TV that I can kind of deflect and kind of separate from, I think that's one thing. But when I'm going through something, I try to do that in private, and that may be my own male ego, and I'm still trying to figure this thing out. Even with 4 children, I'm still trying to figure this parenting thing out. They sprinkled this little girl in there, and that just changed everything. Because right when I thought I had it fixed, it changed all of it up. But yeah, I think we have to guard when we share our tears, and it's a trust thing, Rahman. I think all of us as men, we're trying to figure out who we can trust and when's the right time, and so it's a calculated thing, because I don't want my children to see. I don't want to be vulnerable all the time. I think that there are moments that you can be vulnerable, but as men, we're still raising men, and so maybe I'll shed a tear when I'm 65 in front of them about something other than Rudy.
Hey man, when I watched the Fresh Prince in Carlton, man, and Fresh Prince got mad at Carlton for trying to get that gun and go fight him in that show, man, I lost it, man. Good deal, Carlton. You owe me. I was like, I'm done. I was like, turn the TV off. Turn the TV off. So William, what about you, man? Did lessons learned around showing emotions, showing the tears, whether it's tears of joy, tears of sadness, is that something that you have shown? Is that something that you've seen your other men in your life do?
I've seen it and I've experienced it. To me, being able to cry is a show of strength. Understanding those type of emotions, just like understanding, to me, a man who will lie is showing fear. Understanding these emotions that we all have. I have absolutely no problem with crying, particularly because, for instance, love of family. I love my family deeply, and to lose a family member, I am going to cry. I'm going to cry freely. It doesn't mean that I'm weak. In fact, you probably shouldn't even go that route with the weak part of it. All right, that's just part of who I am. Understand that, and crying to me is an expression of love, as being able to cry is an expression of strength, and that's how I've always raised. That's just part of life. I haven't seen my father cry a lot, but then again, there have been funerals, of course, where you see the emotion. And understanding that it has its place with you.
That's right.
If you are bottling up, that's not healthy. Get a good cry in, let it go. You feel your resolve, and then bounce back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. William, what about you? Your dad talked about, him letting it go. If he got to go, he got to go. So what about you? Did you see that from him? Is that something that you experienced? And do you cry now?
I would say I didn't see it often. I would see it at, like he was saying, at funerals. And even then, I only remember seeing it as like an adult, like maybe 2-3 years ago at my great grandmother's funeral. And so outside of that, I haven't seen him cry over anything other than that. In terms of me, I cry every now and then, but I pick, like you were saying earlier, you got to pick and choose what you're crying about. There's certain things I don't think are worth crying about. Right? So I do think it's important for men to show emotions and be in their feelings, but there's certain things that the way I view things, I'm like, all right, that's not worth tearing up about. Or if you are going to do it, not here, or time and place type thing. Some things cause an emotional reaction, but it might not be the proper venue to just let it flow.
Yeah. Well, let me say this. So I was a counselor. My first job, I told you, I worked in elementary school. I got a degree in counseling, master degree in counseling, and I remember this song. And this is from way back. This is probably 80s or something. I think it was from a movie soundtrack, and it said, "Don't cry out loud. Just keep it inside. Learn how to hide your feelings." And it seemed like an appropriate song back then when I was growing up. It was an old song. But then as I thought about it, and there were some social psychologists or social scientists that would say, like, that's erroneous. Like, you can't keep it inside, because it is a real emotion, and it's, people may see it as not being macho enough. So was there ever a time when you cried or thought about crying and you say, "Nah, I can't do this. I got to hold it in because it's not man enough"? Was there any time like that you felt like that?
Is that anyone, Rahman?
Yeah. Let's William. Let me go there, and then we go to you, Jonathan.
Sure. You know what? There are venues where you're not going to cry. All right. Just as Will stated, there's certain scenarios. Now, of course, if you feel it and you let it go, then that's what you're going to do. But more than likely, the people that are around you, who you surround yourself with, are going to understand that. Now, if I'm in the middle of a crowded room of people I don't know, odds are I'm not crying right then and there. All right. But if I'm around my friends and family, and it's a situation that warrants crying, then I will do so. I have no problem with that. And realistically, these people should know me well enough to understand why I'm crying.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, Rahman. Well, first of all, my wife is in the room, so this is.
She's in the room now. She's
this conversation started to get real uncomfortable real quick. No, it's okay.
And I saw some chat. By the way, I saw some chat messages come in, and people were like, "Are these guys married? Do they cry in front of their spouses and so, or their friends or their family members?" So
no, I'm like William here. I think there's a time and place, right? And so, but I do think that in certain situations as men, and this is something that I'm learning. I'm just going to be vulnerable here. I've learned that I may hold back the tears, but I still cry. And so it's going to come out of me one way or the other. And so, early on, and I may even be guilty of it now. And as men, we got a hard time with this, you can hold so much stuff inside that the slightest little thing that sets you off, you letting it all out then, you're crying for stuff that may have happened 3 months ago, because you've held it in for so long that when the floodgates open up, you're letting it all out, right? And so I've learned that can be extremely unfair to the other person on the opposite end, on the receiving end of that. But it's also unfair to me, but I think we get so bogged down as men that, right, we push it down, we keep moving, we push it down, we keep moving, we push it down, we keep moving, then eventually it's got to come out, right? So whether you cry now or you cry later, the point is it's going to come out. And so I think we have to learn to do a better job of managing that process, because in truth, when I look at a lot of things that's kind of going on in our society, especially as it relates to our young Black men, many of them just need a good cry, to be quite honest. Right. Yeah. Many of them need to find that sacred place, that hollow place that they can trust and let that out. I really feel like Black men, we suffer from PTSD because we're carrying this emotional baggage from whether it's from our childhood or wherever the case may be. And so society's kind of told us that we're not tough if we don't cry. But in truth, man, we're holding this stuff in and we're doing ourselves more harm than good.
Yeah, and it probably manifests itself in other types of ways.
Absolutely.
Because people haven't let that emotion come out, and so they don't get that opportunity to do that. And Jonathan, let me ask you this: so if your son is 13,
yeah,
and when Chris was young, like, did you tell him, like, don't cry? Because I think when we were raised, and I think William, you probably expressed this, it was almost like, don't you better not cry. I remember telling my son this, like, my son was gonna cry, like, you stop that crying, you know. And understandably those are situations, but is that a message that you share with your son now? Like, it's okay for my daughter to cry, but for my son, nah, you don't do that.
You know, and so Rahman, I grew up with that single black mom that said, better stop that crying before I give you something to cry about, right?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Fix your face, whatever that means, right? I can tell you this, like, and I say this to my boys all the time. I think with the oldest one, I don't think I was a great dad. He tells me otherwise, but I don't think I was a great dad. With the middle boy, I think I was a good dad. I think I'm a better dad with my son, and I think to my daughter, I'm the greatest dad in the world. I think you learn because you get a little bit more experience, you get a little older. I think how I address my 13-year-old about crying is certainly different than how I probably handled it with my oldest boy. Yeah. Because when you're young, you just want your boy to be a man's man. Mm-hmm. But you only know what you know. So, I had my children young. So when you're in your 20s, a man's man means something different than when you're in your 40s, right? Because you have a different idea of what a man is. You've become more of a man yourself. And so, I try to encourage him to cry about the things that are important, that mean something, but crying just to cry, crying to get a rise out of people, crying to get attention, like that's not what we're going to do. That's not how we handle things. But if it's pure emotion, and it warrants crying, then by all means, we've got to learn to express that. And I want him to feel confident that he can get that out, and nobody will see him as a weak individual or a weak man.
Yeah. So Will, not William, Will, you somebody to know about crying right now. That beautiful little boy you just had in your lap, and I know he gets his cry on at 7 months. Yeah. So what's the lesson that you're gonna teach him? The granddad is over there looking proud, man. What's the lesson that you're gonna teach him? Is it you got until you're 3 and then that's it, or is it like express yourself?
I think it's interesting to piggyback off of what Jonathan was talking about, how in different eras, right? Like, so when I was younger, it was like, hey man, you don't need to be crying about that, right? And then as I talk to more people in my age range who have children now, it seems to be the thinking that you encourage them to cry, but I still kind of do feel like there's certain things you shouldn't be crying about, right? So if you're just crying,
so wait a minute. So you gonna tell me that there's certain things you can't cry about? Is that what you said?
Yeah. I kind of.
Okay. Give me an example.
Let me interject something right quick, right? Well, you remember the baseball in the backyard, right?
Yeah.
So Will was a little boy, was in the backyard of my parents' house throwing the baseball. And I decided I'm going to throw the ball real hard. Mm-hmm. And I did. And it hit him very hard, and the glove popped. And he started crying. And when he started crying, he started walking towards the house like, I'm done, I quit. And I grabbed him and I said, no, you're not going to cry about this. I put him back there and I threw it again hard. He was still crying, but he caught it. But the point was, I didn't want him to cry and quit.
There we go.
And so, it's maybe that's a little old school, and some people might even think it was cruel. But my thing is you're gonna have to endure pain sometime.
That's right.
And that pain may cause you to cry, but you need to see it through. And that was just a lesson in the backyard. That was it.
That's a lesson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, William, but those are the best lessons.
Yeah. So, Will, you remember that one?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean,
my hand still hurts.
I was ready to pack it in, but he made me stick it up. That is part of my resilience today. Like, the first time I took the bar exam, I didn't pass it. And when I found out I was around people and it didn't really hit me, I was bummed about it. But when I got back home, I cried about it because I put a lot of work into that. I put a lot of hours into studying for that, and it didn't work out. But instead of quitting and saying, oh, well, I'm just done with it, I tried to get in the winter and pass. So that baseball lesson kind of ties into real life experiences that I had later on in life.
Got it. So we talked about love, and talked about saying I love you, and again, I think it's helpful. This is just me from a father and a former social scientist, counselor type of position. I think it's helpful because it makes people feel good about themselves. It increases their overall self-esteem. It helps them feel like valued as a human being. I think we talked about tears. We talked about just having those emotions, those raw emotions, and it's tough. Sometimes we don't want to cry in front of our children. Many of us don't want to cry in front of our significant others, our spouses, or female friends. We don't want to cry because it makes us feel like we may be weak a little bit. But the other emotion, and I think this is kind of a social emotional piece that goes along with this, and this is something that really works on African American men. And you know what I'm going to go with this one is anger. Right? Jonathan talked about PTSD. Right? We have our own type of PTSD. And if any of you all, I think we've all worked with young boys and have seen this built up tension, this anger, and it's for so many different types of reasons. What did you learn as a child, or even as a young adult or an adult period, about showing or expressing your anger? Let's start with you, Jonathan.
Oh man, Rahman, that's a tough one. This anger thing, it can come out in so many different ways, shapes, or form. I think, we can. I think how we express anger is not always the person being belligerent, hollering and screaming, although that can happen. I've seen people who are angry and they'll cut you with their words. You've seen other people who are angry and they're physically angry. You see other people who are angry who retreat, and I think at some point I've probably experienced all of those. I think as we get older, we learn them. I think anger is such a natural thing. I mean, it's okay to be angry. I think it's just how we manage it. And I think for many, I can only speak for myself. I saw anger as a child that was mismanaged. And so that became my example of how, when you're angry, this is how you act. So the idea that, how it gets passed on from generation to generation is really based upon those early impressions of, okay, well, now I see how my dad acts when he's angry, or, I see how my mom acts when he's angry, especially if they're angry and they get the result that they're looking for. Then you're like, oh, this is it. This is how I act out. This is what I get on the end. So I think that it's more really a self-reflection. As you get older, you're trying to figure this thing out. Like, I think how I handle my anger now at 45, as opposed to how I handle my anger at 18, are two totally different things. The unfortunate part is much of that I had to learn on my own. because I didn't trust a man well enough other than my father, who did not handle anger very well himself. I to be quite honest, I very rarely even saw my father angry. He left. When he got angry, he just left. So I never even had an example of, okay, well, I know he's upset about something. How does he manage it? He got in his car and he went to work. Now I don't know who was on the receiving end of that anger once he got to work, but I never got an example of that. So a lot of it I had to learn, and so I never even felt confident enough to ask him as a grown man to say, hey, listen, Pop, how do you handle this? So I think it's this conversation that we're having tonight is really a gateway into a new group of men maybe trying to learn how to express that, but just because we don't really have these conversations like this. I mean, everybody talks about going to the barbershop and talking, but I promise you, this is not a barbershop conversation. You know what I mean? And so it's very rare that we can get together as men. And to be quite honest, if I wasn't asked to be a part of this conversation, I probably wouldn't have had this conversation. I mean, you and I have conversations along with another friend of ours, and we do it jokingly, and we may stay on it for maybe
about
2 3 minutes, man. But then we're off, because it can be a little bit uncomfortable for us to have a conversation centered around anger, being vulnerable, how you handle it, because I don't want to say anything to say for somebody else to go back and be like, dang, did you hear Jonathan? He handling it all wrong. So nobody wants to be judged in the process. So I don't know what's the right way to handle anger or not. I know that I'm not going to get physical. At least I try not to. I try not to get so emotional that I'm not thinking straight. But you just kind of learn these things. And then everything around us as far as society is concerned, man, if you watch what takes place on television, and I was watching one of these little marriage rehab shows, and the guy just hauls off and just like hits his woman, like these images are being bombarded to our young boys, and they're figuring it out like this is how you do it. And so I think it's a touchy subject, man.
It is. And I was thinking about just something from my religious tradition, being Muslim, and Muhammad the Prophet, may the peace be upon him, said, don't be angry. They translated, somebody asked him the question, he was like, don't be angry, don't be angry, don't be angry. And I think it's really the false translation, because anger is a natural emotion. It is the way that you show anger, or the way that, like you said, Jonathan, anger manifests itself. So you can't stop yourself from necessarily being angry, but you can stop yourself from reacting or responding or showcasing anger that's going to be hurtful to you and to other people as well. So I think that's really is how we show anger. And so William, I'll ask you, man. I'll turn to you. Like, I'm sure we all have seen people be angry. Like, we might not have seen them show love, we might not have seen them cry, but we've seen black men, be angry before, right? What kind of lesson did you get, or what did you see that helps you learn about how to deal with, how to respond to anger in your life?
I think life experiences have led me to understand that you need to channel anger productively. Anger is going to happen. No matter what it is, it's going to happen. It's going to be a part of your life. What you do with it is the issue. I've represented, very early on in my career, I represented a lot of young black men in the family court. And the typical issues between a male and a female are present in the court. And emotionally, they can't think straight. They're mad. For whatever reason, they're mad about being in child support, child custody, or anything of that nature. And I find that in talking to them, I always try to give them my experiences and say, look, just be nice. Just be nice. You don't have to be angry, just be nice.
William, do they know they're mad? Do they know they're angry?
Yeah, they know that they're angry. It's just that they don't know what to do with the anger.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the mantra is just be nice. This part of it has to happen because of whatever reason, the two of you split up, you have a child or whatever it is, just be nice. Channel that energy towards building a life for yourself and your child. And I say child because it's usually in the child custody, child support arena that you see this.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them follow instructions, and I see them even to this day. I'll get a phone call from somebody in the past who basically would thank me for giving them a little guidance on how to handle the situation. Mm-hmm. And then there's some who never really learn how to channel that anger. But like I said, my own experience is things happen, but you got to be productive with whatever is going on in your life, or else it will manifest itself into some form of activity that you don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, I remember working. I used to work in a school, and I remember like little boys being angry, like 8, 7 years old, like being angry. Like, and I used to wonder myself, how can you be so angry at such a young age? But I think it's what you said. It's a natural emotion, but it's like they didn't know how to deal with it. And I'll tell you, a lot of the teachers in that school, and most of them were young to middle-aged white women, and there's no dispersion on them, but they just didn't know how to handle it. Right? And they would send all the little black boys to me, say, Mr. Khan, this person's angry. And I'd take them a little bit. I was like, man, go put some cold water on your face, count to 10, let's go. I used to take some of them in the office and start wrestling with them. Like, let's just get it out, man. You need to get that pressure out, because they just didn't know what to do with that anger. And it was frustrating for them. And I think that's what happens with a lot of our young boys, our young men. They don't know what to do with it. It's not even solving the issue, just solving the anger of the issue. And so that's a part of it. William, Will, you too, man. Like, how'd you learn how to deal with anger? Because again, it's natural. Everybody's gonna get angry sometime. How did you learn how to deal with it yourself?
Well, my personality type is I benefit from having a cooling off period.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to think a few steps ahead. I always figure that my initial emotional reaction won't be positive for anything moving forward, right? So like if I say something to me and I want to say XYZ right then, the consequences of me saying that, and then that prevents me from doing it. And I think one of the ways I learned that, just a funny example that comes off the top of my head is I was younger, I used to play video games, and I'd get so mad I couldn't get past a board or something. And my mom would be like, take a break, man. Cut it off. Pause it. Go have a snack. Try it again. And then that would, that molded the whole concept of having time to cool off for a second.
You had time out?
Nah, just relax. Lower the temperature. I'm getting so frustrated. I'm getting so worked up. I'm not thinking straight. I'm not pressing the right buttons because I'm so upset. Come back to it. Yeah.
Hey, Rahman. Yeah. I was just gonna say though, I think Will brought up a good point. Like, I don't ever remember someone having a conversation with me to say, this is how you handle your anger. Like that just wasn't it certainly wasn't a conversation that I had with, and again, I think it may be a generational thing, but no one ever sat aside and said, hey, Jonathan, I'm gonna sit you down and I'm gonna show you how to handle your anger. Certainly not a man in my life said that. So now I'm starting to think, well, dang, did I miss the mark as a father by not teaching my child how to handle the anger? I grew up with a mother who was the disciplinarian, and you mumble under your breath, you getting 2 slaps, that sort of thing. Yeah. So a lot of times I just learned to just shut up and keep it to myself. You walk off and mumble something, hey, what'd you say? And I didn't say nothing. And so I think we may have learned how to deal with anger in a kind of backhanded way. No one taught us how to express it. I think everyone taught us how to keep it in.
Yeah, that's important, man. That's important. I don't even think I remember my dad. I mean, you're right. You don't get there's no lesson on anger management, right?
Right.
You get anger management after the fact, after you've already done something. The court, right? The lawyers there, they tell you to go to anger management classes after something's happened, but there's nothing early on that says here's how you deal with anger. I did see one question too. I wanted to focus on it that came in the chat room. It was from Eugene Perez. This is my buddy Gene from way back. And he said, how do you turn anger into reconciliation? And I think what he means by that is like, how do you deal with anger and say, I'm going to let this, almost like the saying of forgiving, and I don't think we ever forget, but forgiving and being able to move ahead and reconcile with that and be able to build, build at least a way to get around that. How do you get that? He says, return to peace. Peace within yourself, it seems. Like, can we do that? Or have y'all been able to do that? Like, I was so angry at one time, and then something in my life helped me see that this anger is not worth it. I'm gonna, I was watching Martin Lawrence and Will Smith in Bad Boys, and the guy was like, woosah, woosah, he was trying to bring it down, like. How do you go, woosah? We got to do with the ears, right? How do you bring it down into a place of peace? And I guess that peace has to be internal. Is there a way or a strategy that you would recommend that people deal with that? Because it's happening with relationships with spouses, with children, with work relationships. Are there any recommendations that you all have that would help people do that?
Now, I would say being open to forgive is a good start in terms of, and that's a good point or question, how to get to reconciliation. But particularly as adults, a lot of the anger that may arise in a relationship setting, it really deals with, depending on who you with, but it really deals with somebody wanting to be right or wanting to prove that they're right. And even if you are right, you have to understand the other side. Mm-hmm. And there may be a point where the two of you will never agree, but understand that. And just let's forgive and let's move on. That's a way, I would think, to move from anger into reconciliation. Just understand that middle ground in between. You got to forgive that.
Yeah. And so let me ask about this too, because I think that's an important answer. We all have relationships. We've had relationships, and I talked about with significant others. We talked about parents as your fathers and also your children. I want to talk about your relationships, and I hope I don't get too personal here. But with your spouses or your significant others, talk about how you checking your emotions has helped or hurt your relationships. Helped or hurt your relationships, right? Talking with your wife, your spouse, your former spouse, how has it helped or hurt your relationships? Well, I'm gonna start with you, man. You got the little baby, and you're dealing with that fresh relationship, I'm sure there. Yeah. Talk about how checking your emotions has helped or hurt your relationships.
I think it's helped. So we've kind of adopted a strategy to where we, if there's an issue, we decide to go ahead and hash it out prior to going to sleep. And, for me, I think that's most effective just because, candidly, I don't really want to talk about it after the moment, right? Like, after something happens on a certain day, we could take all night to talk about it. That's fine. I would ideally want it to be done with. So I think that's something that we've incorporated in our relationship, and I think that's been helpful.
Does that ever happen? Does it ever happen when 2-3 days later or 2 weeks later, like, remember that time or remember what you did? And
yeah, so it does come up, but it might be like a nuanced part of the argument comes up. But it's the same topic, but it's a different angle. the repetitive argument is what would annoy me. So as long as it's something new, it's kind of like a fresh conversation in it, even though it's the same topic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jonathan, I know you and Crystal have never argued before. At least I've never seen you.
Yeah.
and she might still be in the room, but
Yeah.
Talk about a time when you had to check your emotions either way to help you get through the situation.
Listen, I think back on the old wisdom that my grandfather or old men used to say, and now it starts to become relevant now, right? You pick and choose your battles, right? I think, I recognize what works in my relationship may not work in somebody else's, and what works in somebody else's relationship may not necessarily work in mine. And I think we started off with the idea, hey, we're never going to go to bed angry. But, the truth of the matter is I've had some sleepless nights when I've gone to bed angry. I think what we've learned, or what we're learning, because I think it's an evolution. I think sometimes you got to give people space. You got to give people space in order for them to come to terms with whatever they're feeling. Because when you've got two individuals coming together, whether it's your spouse or whether it's a coworker or anything, they're basing their decision based upon their experience. Whatever their previous experience was, that's really what shapes you and molds you into making some of the decisions that you make, right? And so when you've got two people coming together, you got to give them a chance to kind of process their thoughts. And so I am learning now, and trying to not lash out that anger piece, because I want to whip it right back. I felt hurt. You need to feel this hurt that I'm feeling, that sort of thing. And I'm learning now to maybe just kind of take 2 steps back, get in the right frame of mind, and maybe kind of have that discussion. It's kind of funny. Like I'm pretty good with my words with everybody else, but when I'm angry, I can't always find the words to articulate how I feel. So I'm learning now to try to figure out how do I express that sort of deal. So when you're talking about reconciling, like it can't always be a one-way street. And I agree with Brother William that, sometimes you just got to come to terms and say, hey, we're going to agree to disagree. But I think in order for for something to really be reconciled, both people have to come there with the right frame of mind that we're going to try to come together to reconcile, and that may not always happen in the heat of the moment. Sometimes you got to, I've had some friends that I may have fallen out with. We didn't talk for a year and a half. We see each other, we sit down. Sometimes we don't even remember why we stopped getting mad at each other from the first place, because it could have been a number of different things that could have shaped that. Or maybe I've come to a different position in my life now than where I was before. So I think you got to give people space. And sometimes because I want to reconcile it and I want to get some sort of resolution to it, that other individual may not be ready for that. And so I think you just got to give people their space. And so I think a lot of times, especially among men, we want to fuss and argue and handle it right then because we want to fix it. But sometimes we've learned that, you got to kind of step back a little bit and let people kind of come to grips with their own emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about you, man? You've seen a lot. You've both from being a father, I think you were a husband at one point, and then with the courts, tell us about just how you've had to deal with that and even checking your emotions.
Well, you know what? Over time, you learn that words hurt. And being an attorney, we're trained to ask questions, usually questions we already know the answer to. And you don't just automatically leave it at the door. So when you engage in people, sometimes you may actually drive a line of questioning just to nail somebody not realizing that their perspective is not the same as yours. Sometimes their perspective is on the emotional side, and you're not meeting. And because of that, you get the situation where people are talking at one another, not with one another. And that becomes a problem. So over time, you see that. And you then recognize that, as Jonathan stated, you pick your battles. All right. I'm not in it to win it. I just want to resolve it and let me go to sleep or something. All right. Let's come to an understanding, and that we both can be comfortable with and move on. You know, you get to the point now, it's if you bring anger into it and you're trying to drive home a point and you got two angry people, it's never going to be a resolution. You're just going to be angry in the morning. And as you get older, you understand that, and you learn to reach a common ground and just be satisfied with the common ground.
Have y'all, we're going to go take some questions, but quick question. Have y'all ever had take backs? You know, like, man, I wish I could take that back.
All the time.
Experienced that with
all the time.
If you live long enough, you'll find a few of those along the way.
Absolutely.
like shoot, I shouldn't have said that. You know,
Right.
So it's helpful. So we've gotten several questions here. And Coffee, hope you don't mind. I'm going through a couple of these. She says, as men, do you think the way love was expressed to you, you have that learned behavior that matriculates to your romantic relationships? Okay. So this, I was talking about anger relationships. This person, Naima, I think she got it from someone else maybe. Do you think that the way love was expressed to you, you have that learned behavior that matriculates to your romantic relationships? Will, why don't you start with that one, man?
Yeah, let me think about that for a second. Can you re-ask the question again?
Yep. You know, do you know the way that love was expressed to you? So whether it was mama love, daddy love, you know, the fact that your dad and I'm not sure about your mom said I love you, does that kind of behavior, whether it was through socialization by watching or by personally experience it, do you think that has influenced your relationship, your romantic relationships, your relationships with your other significant others?
Yeah, I think it plays a part. But I would say it's like a mix of that and then whatever experiences you had in other romantic relationships combined. So I think like what you learn from your parents and your family or whatever about love is like the baseline, you know, the foundation of that. And then when you get into romantic relationships with people, you can build on that foundation.
Yeah. Jonathan, you want to take that too? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there are like tiers to this, right? There are levels to this, right? So the type of love that I experienced from my parents and grandparents, it was a very genuine love. And you hope that would carry over into your romantic relationships. But then when you get into romantic relationships, see, that's a whole different type of feeling, right? So now you're trying to couple that with your previous example of love. And now you've got anger that's in there, and you've got ego and pride, and you got all these other things. And so then you got to kind of sort through it and kind of compartmentalize how this thing is supposed to go. So I think, you know, I think I was shown a lot of love early on with my upbringing, but I've had some failed relationships. And so you know, whether it's, I'll take, you know, accountability from the standpoint where maybe I didn't know how to express that love. Maybe I wasn't honest enough with myself or the individual. So it's a lot of things that can kind of shape that. So I don't necessarily believe that, you know, me saying to my child, I love you, I can tell him that till, you know, all day and all night. But it's his experience on what he experiences in a relationship versus the type of love that mom and dad will give him is something. I think it's the examples that we see will help shape that relationship, you know. And I think, you know, I hear a lot of, you know, I hear a lot of young women, single women say, oh, I want that kind of love that, you know, my grandparents had. And I say it all the time. Like from what I heard, my grandfather was a hellraiser, right? So I saw that type of love when they were in their 50s. But from what I gather, when he was in his 30s, he was off the hook, you know. And so I think that example of love I think your example of love and seeing love in relationships and how people deal with relationships, that sort of thing, I think that is probably more of a better foundation going into a relationship than just hearing that you love, because that can also you can kind of take on an elitist sort of thing, like you gotta love me, and you know, it can become very selfish and that sort of thing. I think it's the examples of love that you see that shape your relationships, not necessarily everybody telling you that they love
you. Yeah. William, anything from you on that?
Yeah, you know, I think we have to be fair to the question. And by being fair, what I mean is we've already had a discussion on the types of love that we've learned from our fathers. And that's going to be the baseline as to what you promote, you project. But in all fairness, the love that someone else is ready to receive may not be the same as the love that you can give. And that could create a problem. For instance, those of us who love by providing, you're not really loving someone who needs to hear you say love or some other form of expression. So in all fairness to the question, yes, my experiences from the love provided to me from my father has played out in my romantic relationships, but I've also grown beyond that in understanding what she needed to receive.
That's deep. That's deep. Yeah, I recall, and Jonathan, I don't remember this. This was probably 15 years ago. I was hosting a TV show, and I was interviewing this guy, this Latino guy who had just left the gang. And I was like, "You actually left the gang?" And he was like, "Yeah, you know." And I said, "Well," so I asked him, I said, "Why'd you join the gang?" And he said, you know, he was having problems with his family, and the gang member said to him, "Man, said, come be with us, man. We'll be your family. We'll show you love." And I had to pause and really almost stop the interview, because I was like, wait a minute. Because they said that they'll show you love. And this is a gang, right? You know, he had to fight his way into the gang and do all the things they asked him to do. But because they showed him love, he wanted to be a part of that. So my question to you is, and this is kind of shifting the gears, going back to the young men again, because I think, you know, there's so many men, young men and older men in the criminal justice system that are going through the criminal justice system that went through and engaged in activities because they felt that a group would give them the love that they weren't getting from home. Will and William, I mean, you all are in this system. You all are seeing a lot of this. Is that a fair assessment of what you're seeing? That people just didn't feel the love enough, or the right kind of love? You know, as you talked about, the right kind of love, and so they gravitated to a group that would show them more love. Will, what do you think?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Either one, Will, William.
Go ahead.
I would agree with that assessment just based on what I've seen. People are really seeking love, and you can tell, and you can see it manifest itself in their behavior. And when you go through the system, and we don't spend a lot of time on the criminal side, we're on the civil side, but you still see it, and you can always tell, even with new clients that walk in the door, you can tell who's been loved and who hasn't. You can just, there's something there, and you want to help as best you can, but realistically, it is a situation where people will have to be open to it. You know, when you walk through that system, particularly in the courthouses that we operate in, and you can see it, and you can almost tell who didn't have that foundation.
Mm. Yeah. Jonathan, your thoughts on that?
You know, love is one of those words that I think we in this society, we use it so loosely. And young people, there are a lot of young people, well, don't even let me say young and old. I think all of us are searching for love, or all of us want to be loved. And sometimes in our efforts of wanting to be loved, we'll take anything that we can get that has love, the love bow on it. It may not necessarily be good for us. It may not necessarily be healthy for us, but it's like some of us will say, well, I'm going to take this version of love until I can find another version of love. And so there's like these little like stair steps that we kind of climb. That gang life, if I'm not getting what I perceive as being love at home, that sense of belonging, that sense of protection, you know, I'll have to get it from somewhere else. And so the street life becomes that love. I mean, I think we've all experienced loving something and it not loving us back.
Right.
So I think for it's really the individual, what they perceive as love, the perception of love can be many different things for a whole lot of people. You know, the husband that beats on his wife says, I do it because I love you, right? Well, in his head, he actually believes that that's his way of showing love. But for the person on the receiving end of that, she certainly doesn't feel love. Or vice versa. You may have heard a woman say, hey, he beats on me because he loves me. And I know that he doesn't really mean it, but that's his way of showing his love. I was out of line. So I think that word love, man, can just, it's so loose. It's so, it's really based upon the perception of the individual.
Yeah. So we're going to close out in just a few minutes, and this has been very enlightening. We hope and engaging and real. I mean, I appreciate your real candor around this. Just in this last few minutes, I'm going to ask for you to just kind of give some closing statements. And before that, I'll just mention some words that we heard. I mean, we know we talked about love and anger and tears, but the words around trust and vulnerability, and a couple of words we didn't hear, but we heard them, but we didn't say them, I think was around hurt and pain and how those things manifest themselves in anger. And sometimes those tears are of joy and of relief, and us being able to express ourselves in those ways is something that it's a process that we're still learning how to do. So Will, I'll start with you. Just in closing, man, could you give us, you're a young father. Could you give us, what's one thing that you plan on doing to help your son grow and to learn how, again, you got a long time to go, but to grow and help him manage his emotional states and his way to deal with other people?
Well, right now, it's still kind of early with him being 7 months, but I did have in mind just having constant talks or showing him examples, or whenever something pops up, pulling him to the side. I think that constant presence will stick with him. Because it reminds me of a lot of conversations I had with my dad, where like in the moment it might not have looked like I was listening, but we've had them so many times that, some of those lessons ultimately end up sticking. So that's kind of my strategy, what I want to do with him moving forward.
So they do work, huh?
Learn the thing or two. Learn a thing or two from that man.
So Will, you had your son here today and talking and participate in this conversation. It has to make you feel a sense of pride yourself in being able to know that those lessons that you taught were beneficial. And for you, can you give us an example or give us some advice on ways to continue the relationships? I mean, you have a 32-year-old son, and how you've managed to keep that relationship besides just the working together. I can tell there's a true sense of appreciation and love between you and your son. So can you give us some examples or give us some advice on what you've done? I mean, what other people can do?
Yeah, sure. I'm very proud of Will. I watch him as a young father do the things that he's supposed to do as a young father, and his presence is going to be there and it's going to be felt. And knowing that he has a support system, and support is something that you're going to need your entire life from somebody. As his father, I am part of his support system. Not only, have I laid the framework as to what he should do, and let's to be clear about it, it's what he should do, but not what you have to do. You can make your own choices as an adult, but if you do, you put down the positive framework as to what a man or what we believe men should do in our lifetime, and you'll make the decision, he'll make the right decision as he moves forward. And as he's moving forward, I'm there as support. Support is just a lifeline. It's not financial support, but it's emotional support. It's any type of support he needs, I'm there for him. And by virtue of him knowing that, because I'm even as I get older and my parents are elderly, they are still my support system. If I need to talk to somebody, I can call my father, I can call my mother, and thank God that they're still here, but that is my support system, and I want him to feel the same way as he grows up and matures and gets older and gets more involved. There's roads that he's going to travel that I've already been down. And there's a saying I had as him growing up as a little boy. I would say, Will, if I tell you the stove is hot, do you need to touch it? And that was just trust that I'm going to tell you to do the right thing. And that followed me through life, and hopefully it follows him.
Well, how does it make you feel knowing that you get that permanent support system there?
Great.
Oh, you went out. I can't hear you, Will.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's my internet. I feel great about having a support system because I end up comparing it to that of my peers often. And it's just something that I come to appreciate more as I got older, because a lot of people just don't have that. They don't have that person you can reach out to and get some advice from. Or if they do have a person like that, they're steering them in the wrong direction, or they're enabling them to do things that they shouldn't do. People in my support system, they have no problem telling me, hey man, that wasn't right, or you shouldn't look at it this way, maybe look at it that way. There's no fear in checking me on that, and I appreciate that.
Jonathan, this question came in. I wanted to make sure I share it with you. It was about, just in closing, just how the things we talked about, or the ways that you express your love, how is it manifested in the way that you not treat your son, but treat your daughter?
Wow. Well, first, let me say this, man. It's been a real honor and privilege to be on here and have this conversation. I'll tell you, I tell my wife this all the time. If I had a daughter first, I would have had any more children, because I didn't think my heart was big enough to even love any one thing as much as I love this little girl. It has.
Don't make me cry, man. Don't make me cry, bro.
No. Listen, man. Let me tell you. It has changed my entire life, my entire perspective. You know, I used to hear people when I was young and be like, would you treat your mom or your sister like that? And it kind of would in one ear and out the other, and you say, no, I wouldn't, that sort of thing. But now I think about it, and it's like, would you allow somebody to treat your daughter like that? And that's just, man, that just changes everything. I think I didn't really grow up with a sister in the home. So I didn't have that sort of infinity with women. My mom was a straight disciplinarian, and it was just like her way or no way, you know, that sort of thing. I think it softened me. I think I think about things in a little bit of a different perspective. I think it even has, dealing with young boys, I think it's made me a little bit more tender, because I'm thinking, hey, this might be a future son-in-law sort of deal. And so I kind of gotta put what little bit of wisdom that I've learned over the years, I've got to kind of instill it in everybody in some way, shape, or form. And so I thank God for the love that I received as a child, especially if it is allowing me to be a better father to a daughter. But it's much more sacred. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love my boys, but it's something about that little girl that, you know, it's softened me as a man. It's made me be a little bit more patient. I go out of my way to let her know that she's loved, she's appreciated, she's my little princess, she's a gift. You know, I'm trying to give her all of the encouraging words. I'm opening doors all the time. I'm trying to give her the example of what she should look for, or the values that she should look for in a spouse. And I'm doing that, and she's 10. So I'm just trying to show her, you know, and it's unfortunate. Like I've been around women who you can tell that they did not have a father in their life. And you can, there's something there, and you can truly see it. And so I'm just trying to make sure that I love on her in the proper way. I want her to be strong and independent. But I also want her to be able to appreciate love, and know that it's, you know, everybody wants companionship, and you want to find somebody that you can grow with and build a life with. And I don't want to make her so independent that she feels like she doesn't need a man. I just want her to need a man for the right reasons. I don't want her to feel like she's got to find a man to complete her, you know. And so yeah, it's to answer that question, yeah, it's made a big difference. It's made a big difference in me. And you know, this is we're constantly changing.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to be with all of my flaws and screw ups, man, in the past. I'm just trying to be the best version of myself today than I was yesterday. And I think that's all we do as men.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And you know, the chat room has been blowing up, man. I keep seeing them pop up throughout the time. And, you know, there were some questions we didn't get a chance to get to, but, you know, I really appreciate that. And I think, you know, the fathers and their daughters, I mean, that, you know, that might be a whole different workshop for us. And just, you know, dealing with women and you know, somebody commented on how do you know when a girl doesn't have a father around? Guys know.
Yeah.
Like, guys know when, because we won't go into that now, but guys know when that happens. And so
next conversation, for sure.
That's another conversation. Like that's real. But I appreciate all of your candor around these topics, man. It's rare that we get these opportunities. I'm thankful to be able to facilitate, but really it's a learning opportunity for all of us. And we continue to learn, we continue to grow, and we continue to look for ways to build and learn from each other. And I think it's super valuable. And having what there are consultants now that are going around teaching people EQ. You ever heard of EQ, emotional quotient, which basically people learn how to manage their emotions in the corporate setting or the school setting or whatever, the business setting. And it's different than IQ, because your IQ is how smart you are, but emotional IQ is how do you manage your emotions. People are getting paid to teach people about that. Imhotep said, know thyself. Like Maslow said, the highest thing you can do is self-actualization, like being able to know who you are so you can better be able to work with other people, so you can better be able to have relationships with other people, but most importantly, to have a knowledge of yourself and being able to communicate with others and manage with others and work with others. So I think this opportunity, as Black men, of us having these real kinds of conversations, again, we probably could have talked, even more deeper about a lot of other subjects related to this, but I appreciate this. It doesn't seem like we've been going for an hour and a half already. So thank you guys so much. Will Johnson III, William Johnson Jr., Jonathan Nazeer, thank you all so much, man. I give you a clap, thumbs up. Give me some thumbs up in the chat rooms, man. Let's give these guys some love for being a part of this. I think this is really valuable for us. I am, again, Rahman Khan. I'm going to turn it over to my friend Kafi, who is going to close it out for us. So again, thank you all so much for being a part of this.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Coffee,
You're
you're
Coffee.
There you go. Thank you so much for joining us. That was so beautiful. And of course, we definitely need to continue this conversation on. This is just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface of all of these things that we need to talk about in our community so we could be able to be healthy and productive and establishing ourselves as African-American people.
And we got to make some money.
Hey, you got to make money to establish those communities.
That's right. That's right.
They have me on that chat. I want to see that one.
I know, right? Look, we got to be healthy with ourselves, be emotionally in check, and we can go out and make some money and build communities together, right?
That's how we do it.
As a family, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's right. Okay, everybody out there, New Africa World, we have tomorrow, we have Miss Unique Webster, the Effective Communication Coach. She will be speaking with us about how to bring your best authentic self to a speed pitch, establishing why effective communication is important for making a great impression, and the use of the power of words and storytelling for your own personal branding. Okay, so I see you all tomorrow. Thank you for joining us today. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Everybody, have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.